Right now on Morning News Now, new leadership in Canada sending a message to the U.S. This morning, Canada's newly elected Prime Minister calling on Canadians to protest against President Trump's steep tariffs on Canadian goods.
He's attacking Canadian families, workers, and businesses, and we cannot let him succeed. And we won't.
Plus, more cuts to the federal workforce, this time at a top U.S. health agency. And Homeland Security now using polygraph tests to crack down on leaks over its immigration operations. We have team coverage. Also this morning, a race against the clock on Capitol Hill to avoid a government shutdown. We'll break down the new funding bill unveiled by Republicans just days before the deadline and tell you why it's far from a done deal. Plus, fire and ice, millions of people still recovering from a weekend of wild weather. And the danger isn't over yet. We're tracking the conditions, the warnings, and what you can expect as we start the work week. And homeward bound, 2 NASA astronauts getting ready for their long journey home after a days-long mission turned into a 9-month stay. More on the plan to finally get them back to Earth. It's been a long time.
10 days, 10-ish months, you know, what's the difference? Good morning, good to have you with us on a Monday. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Thanks very much for being here. We're going to begin our show with the economy and new developments in the ongoing trade war between the United States and some of its closest trading partners. Overnight, retaliatory tariffs from China targeting U.S. farm goods went into effect. Starting today, U.S. agricultural imports worth around $21 billion will be subject to an extra 15% levy. It comes as President Trump suggested on Friday that Canadian lumber and dairy could also soon face U.S. tariffs.
This clash over trade comes as Canada passes the baton to a new leader. Mark Carney will soon take over as Prime Minister after winning a leadership race over the weekend. A former central banker, he has vowed to keep Canada's retaliatory tariffs in place until, quote, Americans show us respect. Now, in an interview with Fox News yesterday, President Trump again defended his use of tariffs. He was then asked yesterday whether his measures could lead to a U.S. recession, which has become a growing fear. Here's how he responded.
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. That's a big thing. And there are always periods of it takes a little time. It takes a little time.
We've got a team standing by to talk about all this and more. We're going to start things off with NBC News White House correspondent Aaron Gilchrist. So, Aaron, let's talk about these Chinese tariffs that went into effect. What U.S. imports are they targeting, and what could this all mean for farmers?
Well, Joe and Savannah, we knew that this was something that was going to be coming, and potentially this could have a big impact on farmers here in the United States. These Chinese tariffs, these retaliatory tariffs that went into effect overnight are affecting, as you indicated, the agricultural industry. 15% tariff on things like chicken, wheat, and corn from the United States, and then another 10% tariff on things like soybeans, pork, beef, and fruit. This is according to the Chinese, and we know that this is also a result of the new tariffs that President Trump placed on Chinese goods. Last week, we saw that tariff increase by 10%. There was already a 10% tariff on certain Chinese goods, most Chinese goods. The president indicated that this was a result of the inflow of fentanyl, illegal drugs coming into the United States through China, and the same was to be applied to Mexico and Canada because of the flow of fentanyl across the U.S. southern and northern borders. Although, as you noted, there have been some mitigation in those tariffs for the Canadians and for the Mexicans as well. But it seems as though even those tariffs are going to go into effect. And as you think about these products that the Chinese just hit with new tariffs overnight, you're right. Farmers are going to feel the brunt of this. The administration seems to indicate that there could be potentially more retaliation and that there would be a leveling of the playing field that potentially would help farmers here in the U.S., Joe and Savannah.
Aaron, on top of this retaliation from China that we mentioned a moment ago, also the president's looking to expand tariffs with Canada by hitting their lumber and dairy. Is the Trump administration concerned that these trade wars could push us toward a recession? We heard a little bit in that interview we just played, a little bit of there from the president. What else is he saying?
Yeah, I think we're getting a little bit of a mixed message on that. The president didn't outright say, no, we're not going to see a recession, but there are other leaders in his administration who do feel as though that's not going to happen. The reality is that the president feels as though these other countries that are currently seeing additional tariffs and that will see additional tariffs come April 2nd, he's said that they are taking advantage of the United States, that the U.S. is getting ripped off. And if this country is able to start doing, if businesses are able to start doing more business here in the United States in terms of manufacturing and building, then there wouldn't be tariffs that they'd have to deal with. I want you to hear what the Commerce Secretary had to say yesterday about the idea of a recession.
There's going to be no recession in America. What there's going to be is global tariffs are going to come down because President Trump has said, you want to charge us 100%? We're going to charge you 100%. And you know what they say? They say, no, don't charge us 100%. We'll bring ours down. Foreign goods may get a little more expensive, but American goods are going to get cheaper, and you're going to be helping Americans by buying American.
Now, President Trump said that there would be a period of transition. You heard the Commerce Secretary there suggest that foreign goods could become more expensive. But that is something, Joe and Savannah, that's really driving concerns for consumers. And so when consumers are worried about prices going up, they sometimes start spending less money, even on things that maybe are American made. And so we've yet to see exactly what the repercussions will be for these tariffs, although the president seems to think that in the long run, these are going to be a good thing for the United States.
Aaron, let's ask you about something that's now a daily headline, the Trump administration's ongoing push to try and downsize the federal government. We understand now employees from the Department of Health and Human Services, they were offered voluntary buyouts to resign. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, our understanding is that this email went out Friday afternoon to all of the HHS employees offering a $25,000 payment, a buyout for them to leave government service. This is through the Voluntary Separation Incentive Payment Program. This is actually a program that we know exists within the U.S. government. There are certain things that have to be happening in order for any particular agency to trigger use of that program. And we know that this week, the administration, the Office of Personnel Management, as well as the Office of Budget and Management, had told the agencies, the federal departments, that they need to start drawing up reorganization plans for that would include a massive reduction in force. And so this incentive payment is one of the tools available to the agencies before that reduction in force means layoffs. So they're able to offer people these buyouts, essentially. There are also some agencies that are looking at early retirement programs that could be authorized for use before we start to see the reduction in force come in the form of massive layoffs across the federal government, Joe and Savannah.
All right, Aaron Gilchrist at the White House. Aaron, thank you.
Well, as the trade war between the U.S. and Canada heats up, a movement to buy Canadian and boycott American goods is gaining popularity.
NBC News correspondent Jay Gray joins us now from Ottawa, Canada, with more on this. Jay, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Joe. Good morning, Savannah. And yeah, we all know that Canadians have a well-earned reputation of being kind, of being composed, reserved, but we're also quickly learning that our neighbors to the north, when they feel like they've been slighted, feel like they've been challenged, they are quick to stand up and push back. Anxiety, frustration, even anger, brewing across Canada right now.
It's a very uneasy feeling.
With the tug-of-war over tariffs and President Trump suggesting the U.S. could absorb their country as a state.
It's having a huge ripple effect across the country. I mean, we're in limbo at the moment. It's awful. Not knowing which direction we're going with.
A ripple going into a wave of Canadian nationalism. Protests outside the U.S. Embassy. Booing the American anthem. And as the trade war intensifies, buying things made at home, or really anywhere but America.
Mexico.
Government-run stores pulling American wine and liquor from shelves. The common thread here.
A lot of people feel betrayed by our closest ally.
Emma Cochran's wildly popular hoodies, shirts, and caps providing a direct response to the political rhetoric driving a wedge between the countries.
And this felt like a way that we could participate and just kind of say, we're going to stand up for Canada.
While back at the coffee shop, one of the most requested drinks, the Americano, has a new name.
And a friend came in and said, you know, with everything going on, you should change it to Canadiano.
Served with a side of Canadian resolve and pride. You know, the Americano, a big seller at Morning Owl before the name changed, but in the week after it became the Canadiano, the sales doubled. That's certainly, Joe and Savannah, not a scientific poll, but what a lot of people are saying is it really does show the commitment, the pride Canadians have in their country right now, and they're unwilling to back down.
All right, Jay Gray, thank you very much. Well, the Department of Homeland Security is using polygraphs on employees to determine who might be leaking information about immigration operations, according to 4 sources familiar with the practice.
The DHS officials are upset that ICE arrest numbers have been lower than expected, and they're blaming it on leaks to the media revealing where they plan to carry out operations.
NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen's been following this. He joins us with the latest. John, good morning. So what exactly do we know about this issue and how these polygraphs are being carried out?
Hey, good morning, guys. As my kids would say, no cap on the lie detectors. They are being employed right now by DHS broadly to try to stop leakers. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem has said that they are going to prosecute people who have been found to leak. Of course, the science behind polygraphs is not exactly settled. There are U.S. security agencies that employ polygraphs from time to time, including the Secret Service. But this is absolutely creating a chilling effect beyond, sort of beyond the immigration raids and beyond the ICE agency itself, but farther throughout DHS. I spoke to somebody who's worked there for a long time this last week who said, that they're going to go dark now. They're not going to talk to reporters at all anymore because it's just not worth it, even though they were not talking about immigration issues.
John, a couple questions here. First, does HHS have an official response to some of this reporting? And then also just give us some historical perspective here. Have we seen tests like this carried out in the past?
Yeah, so the response of DHS officials is yes. We've seen that from Secretary Noem. We've seen it from her spokesperson, Tricia McLaughlin. Basically, they have said they can and will use these polygraphs to figure out who's leaking information. There's every agency has its own rules, has its own laws, but there is a history of this within the U.S. government. It's not something new. It doesn't tend to be, about leaks to reporters always. There are other reasons to use polygraphs within an agency to determine who's telling the truth or who's lying about various things when there are, for instance, internal investigations.
John, I know at this point, is this right, that 2 employees have been accused so far of leaking information? What do we know about their situations?
So that's what Secretary Noem has said. I'm not up on exactly who these people are, or what they're accused of leaking, and what the evidence of that is. So might have to wait a little bit longer to find out just the specifics of that.
All right, Jonathan Allen, thank you very much.
The clock is ticking once again for Congress to avoid a government shutdown. Lawmakers have until the end of this week to pass a spending bill to keep things up and running. Republicans revealed their newest funding plan over the weekend, but it's still unclear whether they have enough votes to pass it. NBC News White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor has the latest.
The countdown to a potential government shutdown is on as a Friday night deadline looms large. House Speaker Mike Johnson unveiling a new bill that would fund the government through the end of September. But it's not clear whether Johnson has the votes to pass it, with some Republicans already criticizing the legislation.
The CR is terrible on defense and the border.
The so-called clean continuing resolution does include an increase in defense spending while reducing non-defense spending. President Trump urging his party to support the bill, writing online, all Republicans should vote please, yes, next week. And though Republicans control the House and Senate, the slim majority in the House means just 2 Republican defections there could derail the bill. And there's already trouble with 2 GOP congressmen. Thomas Massey is a no, and Brian Fitzpatrick is undecided.
But I think we're really going to be learning over the next 24 hours what's in it and what's not in it.
The bill would also require Democratic votes in the Senate, and many in that party are accusing Republicans of recklessly cutting things like health care and nutritional assistance.
I would argue we are already in a partial government shutdown, and that's because of what Elon Musk and his Doge frat bros are doing.
And amid increased economic uncertainty about federal cuts and a possible shutdown, President Trump saying this when questioned about whether he is expecting a recession this year.
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big.
House Speaker Mike Johnson says he plans to bring the bill up for a vote as early as Tuesday. It's a crucial test for the new Republican majority in Washington as both sides trade blame. Back to you.
Yamiche, thank you.
Well, this morning, the Secret Service is investigating a shooting near the White House involving their agents and an armed man who traveled from miles away. NBC News White House correspondent Von Hilliard has the details.
Troubling questions after a shooting near the White House.
Respond for the shooting, 17th East Street, Northwest.
Secret Service saying their agents shot a man after an armed confrontation with law enforcement, after they were notified of a suicidal individual traveling to D.C. According to two senior law enforcement officials, the suspect is 27-year-old Andrew Dawson, driving this white Chrysler sedan from Indiana.
Units approached from the 18th Street side.
That's when just one block from here, authorities found the man's parked vehicle and then spotted somebody who matched the man's description here, and that's when shots ensued. The close proximity of the gunshots to the White House heightening new concerns about security around the president, who spent the weekend in Palm Beach. President Trump survived an assassination attempt last year at a Pennsylvania campaign rally, and then while golfing on his West Palm Beach course 2 months later. Sean Curran, who was the Secret Service special agent in charge of his detail during the Butler attack, is now the agency's director. The security of the president and Vice President Vance of pinnacle concern. Vance, with his 3-year-old daughter, approached on the sidewalks of Cincinnati on Saturday by protesters supportive of Ukraine. Vance posting that the protesters followed us around and shouted as my daughter grew increasingly anxious and scared, though noting it was a mostly respectful conversation.
I said, if I talk to you for a few minutes, we leave my 3-year-old daughter alone, and you said yes. So I'd like you guys to respect.
Our thanks to Von Hilliard for that report. Well, the Secret Service says Dawson was transported to a hospital near the White House for care. Meanwhile, police say they did recover a gun from the scene.
Federal investigators want to know why a small plane crashed into a residential part of Pennsylvania over the weekend. The plane went down shortly after taking off yesterday from Lancaster Airport, damaging several cars. But officials say no one on the ground was hurt, and all 5 people on board survived the crash and were taken to hospitals for treatment. No word yet on how severely they were injured. NBC News correspondent Marissa Parra has more on what happened.
Terrifying moment in southern Pennsylvania, where the governor says a small private plane crashed near Lancaster Airport.
They're receiving multiple calls for a aircraft crash at the airport.
The FAA says the plane, known as a Beechcraft Bonanza, crashed around 3 p.m. local time. Authorities say 5 people were on board. Air traffic control indicating there may have been a serious incident in the lead-up.
Lancaster Tower, Bonanza 347, Mike has an open door. We need to return for landing.
Mike, pull up. Rescue 1, Lancaster Tower. The aircraft is down out just behind the terminal on the parking lot street area.
Dramatic video shows thick smoke and flames billowing out of cars. The governor says the Pennsylvania State Police is on the ground to assist first responders. This video showing part of the plane lying on top of cars near this building. This crash coming after a string of aviation crashes and close calls in the last 2 months.
And our thanks to Marissa Parra for that report.
Well, firefighters on New York's Long Island have made big progress containing a massive brush fire that burned hundreds of acres over the weekend. The flames are now at least 80% contained, but investigators are still working to figure out what sparked it. Meanwhile, the South got hit with wild weather of its own: rain, hail, even snow. Here's NBC News correspondent Maya Eaglin with more.
An around-the-clock battle on New York's Long Island. Officials finally getting the upper hand, but worried the worst could still be ahead.
We are concerned because the winds are still blowing, that it might spark up again.
The area, a tinderbox with drought-like conditions. Thousands of trees were destroyed. Buildings burned too.
My God!
Mark Cirillo's business is one of them.
When you see this destruction, how does it make you feel?
It's upsetting. I watched flames go up to our property, up to the building, and up and over the top of the building, and I watched it like there was a giant hand.
While down south, Texas reeling from severe storms that battered the state with a mix of rain and hail. Even snow. The storm turning deadly near Dallas, winds ripping this building apart. But back in Long Island, crews keeping an eye on hot spots while the search for answers has already begun.
It's too early to tell whether or not this fire was started naturally or there's some nefarious origin. But we are going to get to that, and we should have an answer within the next couple of days.
We're also hearing from investigators that they're going to be using drone surveillance and ground crews to try and figure out how and why this fire actually happened. Back to you.
All right, Maya, thank you.
A lot of weather headlines over the weekend, so what can we expect this week? Let's bring in meteorologist Michelle Grossman.
She's tracking the latest on some rainy weather that's lingering across the southeast. Hey, Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Great to see you. Happy Monday. Yeah, it's a soggy start in the southeast. We're looking at the chance for moderate to heavy rainfall, and that will bring the chance for some flash flooding. You can see the rain falling already. It's been falling for a day or so. It's going to continue to fall today before it moves completely out on Tuesday. But you notice the brighter colors. That's where we're seeing the heavier pockets of rain, and that's where we could see the chance for some flash flooding. This is beneficial rain, by the way, in portions of the Carolinas, but still it's a soggy start, and we're going to see that rainfall all day long. Could see a few embedded thunderstorms as well. Clear to see where that front is. That's that line kind of crossing the peninsula of Florida, and that's where we're going to see that heavy rain staying put. So we do have flood alerts. That includes Jacksonville, where you see in this green area. That is the likeliest spot for seeing some flooding. Again, could see some flash flooding as well. Here is the setup. We have an area of low pressure just moving slowly over the state. It's bringing that rain. It's just lingering all day long before it finally moves out. The last place to move out will be in the Carolinas, from North Carolina, South Carolina, to portions of Georgia as well. And notice the heaviest amounts will fall in North Carolina and South Carolina, from Wilmington to Myrtle Beach and also Charleston. Again, that's where you see those brighter colors, and that's where we expect the highest amounts of rain falling. Beneficial rain, but still kind of a pain on a Monday, and really not great to start out your work week that way. We do have wind alerts, too, in the northern tier of the nation. Really warm here. It's going to be gusty as far as the winds go. Winds gusting up to 65 miles per hour. Temperatures 20, 30, even 40 degrees above what is typical for this time of year. You kind of put that together, and we're going to see fire alerts here for 11 million people throughout the plains and northern plains, into the central plains, also portions of the southwest. So we will be concerned about that as we go throughout this Monday. We're going to watch that very closely. Winds could gust over 65 miles per hour. It's extremely dry in terms of the air and also the vegetation. So with the winds blowing, temperatures really warm, record highs too. We're going to see temperatures near 80 degrees in some spots. Omaha, 79 degrees. That is 31 degrees above what is typical for this time of year. Denver, 73. Wichita, 78 degrees. Warm too in Little Rock, 71. Notice that warm air all the way to the northeast. This is welcomed in the northeast because it's been chilly. We're kind of going up and down in terms of the temperatures. But 63 degrees today in New York City. That's 14 degrees above what is typical for this time of year. 66 in Charleston, West Virginia, and 69 in Bowling Green. We'll keep the spring warmth in place. A little preview to spring. 68 degrees in Philadelphia tomorrow. 16 degrees above normal. And notice that big dip in temperatures back to the Midwest. Milwaukee, 43 degrees after a warm day today. Just 55 in Des Moines. But we'll keep the warmth in place in Dallas, Memphis, Atlanta, and also Charlotte. Staying mild throughout the rest of the work week in New York City. 50 on Thursday, 60 degrees on Friday. Temperatures in the mid-60s, even upper 70s in Raleigh, 77 on Wednesday, 76 on Thursday, 78 degrees on Friday. So as we look at the week ahead in overall picture, we're watching those rain and storms today in the southeast, record highs in the northern tier of the nation. And then notice the Pacific Northwest. We're looking at a little rain and snow. That will change drastically on Wednesday. We have a powerful system that's going to get its act together on Wednesday. This will be our next cross-country weather maker, and it's going to bring a whole lot of impacts Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. But for Wednesday, it's going to focus on the west coast, where we're looking at mountain snow and flooding rains along the coast. Plenty of sunshine on Wednesday in the middle of the nation before that rain does arrive, and spring warmth still along the Carolinas into the southeast. Friday, that storm system makes its way into the middle of the country. Now we're talking heavy snow for the Intermountain West, rain from North Dakota into the Midwest, down to portions of the Gulf Coast states, and yet again, more rain and snow throughout the West. So, guys, that's going to be something we're going to watch, because we're looking at the chance for some severe weather also by later on this week with that big system. But first, it will start out in the West on Wednesday. Back to you.
Reminder, it's still winter in many parts of the country.
Yeah.
All right, Michelle,
Yep.
thank you so much. Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, a fun spring break taking a horrible turn. An American college student now missing in the Caribbean. When we come back, what we're learning about the moments when she was last seen.
Up first after the break, more tension between the U.S. and Ukraine, compromising peace talks over the war with Russia. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. U.S. and Ukrainian officials are preparing to meet in Saudi Arabia this week for peace talks, and President Trump is bringing some new requirements to the negotiating table. According to an administration official and another U.S. official, Mr. Trump has privately made it clear to aides that a signed minerals deal won't be enough to restart military aid and intelligence sharing with the war-torn country. The officials say he wants to see a change in Zelensky's attitude toward peace talks and a willingness to make concessions in negotiations.
The U.S. made the decision to withhold aid from Ukraine after a contentious meeting between Trump and Zelensky at the end of last month, you might remember, in the Oval Office. Well, Russia is continuing to ramp up its attacks on the country, with more than 20 people killed in heavy aerial attacks over the weekend.
NBC News chief international correspondent Keir Simmons joins us now from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, with more. Keir, good morning. So just walk us through some of these new requirements the Trump administration is asking of Ukraine and its President Zelensky in order to get this deal done. I mean, with all this in mind, what can we expect from these peace talks now?
Well, the peace talks here in Jeddah are absolutely crucial for Ukraine, Joe. President Zelensky is flying in to meet with the Crown Prince here, hoping that Saudi Arabia will provide some mediation, knowing that he needs to repair the damage from that disastrous meeting in the Oval Office, and that if these meetings in the coming days, this intense diplomacy does not go well, then it's likely that there'll be more pressure from President Trump. Now, to answer your question in terms of what the administration is looking for, it's difficult necessarily to pin it down. Where the administration suggests that it is looking for Ukraine to be ready for peace talks, does that mean that it wants Ukraine to agree to give up on sovereign territory? Does it even mean one thing that the Russians have been kind of relentlessly demanding, that they would be given more territory in the Donbass, not just frozen on the contact line, on the conflict line, but more space? Another question is how is Ukraine expected to deal with that small piece of Russian land that it still holds? Intense fighting there right now. So, I mean, there are many, many questions. Secretary of State Rubio, National Security Advisor Walton, President Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff, all coming here to sit down with their Ukrainian counterparts. And I suspect the talks are going to be very difficult. Look, I mean, the Russians are fighting, continuing to fight. 24 killed in one day over the weekend in Ukraine, raising the question about whether the Russians really are ready for a ceasefire. Meanwhile, there are indications Ukraine wants the U.S. to be involved in ceasefire verification. So to put it simply, bluntly even, it's turning out that ending this war really isn't easy, Joe.
Keir, why are these talks taking place where you are, in Saudi Arabia? What is their role in these negotiations?
Yeah, that's a great question. Saudi Arabia played mediator between the U.S. officials and Russian officials just a few weeks ago. It's been trying to bring all sides together. It is, I guess you could say, neutral ground for the different sides to meet. For example, they could have looked to meet in Belarus, but clearly that is more than just an ally of Russia, very, very close to Russia. Could have looked to meet in Turkey, and there have been US-Russian meetings in Turkey in the past few weeks. But again, Turkey is a member of NATO. So I think it's a combination of the diplomatic role that the Crown Prince here in Saudi Arabia is increasingly playing in the world, the position of Saudi Arabia, and the fact that there are relations between the different sides. Just as an example, a number of Gulf countries here have mediated prisoner exchanges between Russia and Ukraine, including exchanges that involved those Ukrainian children being handed back to families in Ukraine.
Keir, you mentioned President Zelensky is flying in to meet first with the Crown Prince today. What should we know about that meeting?
Well, we won't know very much, honestly. Inevitably, a meeting with the Crown Prince is cloaked in secrecy, frankly. He's actually much more open than a previous Saudi rulers and crown princes have been, but all the same. And I think, too, there's an argument to say that these various leaders and officials are looking for opportunities to have conversations that aren't in public. I mean, let's just put it this way. You saw how it went when a debate was had in public in the Oval Office between President Zelensky, President Trump and Vice President Vance. It did not go well. And there are many who say that ultimately that was mishandled and that those sort of conversations should have taken place in private. So my expectation is we won't know very much about what is said between the Saudi Crown Prince and the leader of Ukraine.
All right, Keir Simmons, we know you'll keep on it. Thanks so much.
Well, surprise strike at Germany's Hamburg airport left thousands of travelers stranded this morning.
NBC reporter Matt Bodner joins us from London with that and some other world headlines. Matt, good morning.
Joe, Savannah, good morning. More than 4,000 passengers were stranded in Hamburg airport yesterday following this sudden strike by airport staff. The strike's actually part of a larger nationwide strike that's going forward today at 13 German airports. Hamburg airport staff announced their early strike just 30 minutes before walking out, leaving service desks and other roles in the airport empty. In the end, just 10 of the airport's 280 scheduled flights managed to take off on Sunday as a result of the strike. Moving along now to Sudan, where the U.S. State Department has ordered non-essential U.S. government personnel to leave the country following an outbreak of fighting in northern Sudan. An arms group began fighting with government forces last week, leading to the arrest of 2 deputy ministers and an army official loyal to the vice president, himself a former rebel. The country saw intense fighting between 2013 and 2018, and since then a fragile peace plan has been holding ever since, but the latest fighting may derail it. We'll wrap up this hour in Cyprus, where local micro wineries are attempting to revive a 3,000-year-old classic. It's called Commandaria, and it's the world's oldest recorded recipe for a wine. It's a deep red sweet wine, and it actually won the first known wine competition back in the 13th century. In Byzantine times, it was used as a communion wine. Production peaked in Venice in the 15th and 16th centuries. Today's incarnation can cost you anywhere between $20 and $150 per bottle, and its unique taste is attributed to the rich volcanic soil found on Cyprus. Back to you guys.
Pretty neat. Love that.
Trader Joe's already trying to figure out how to make it into $3 chuck. So, all right. Coming up, an American student gone missing during spring break.
The more time that goes by, it gets worse off because then you're not on a hot lead.
When we come back, the desperate search now underway in the Caribbean. This is Morning News Now. We are back with some data from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. So far this year, ICE has made nearly 23,000 arrests, all part of the Trump administration's massive immigration crackdown. One of ICE's latest targets was a Palestinian activist at Columbia University. NBC's Camila Bernal has more on that student's arrest.
Ironically, a Palestinian activist who helped lead the protest at Columbia University is in ICE custody. Mahmoud Khalil's attorney saying in a statement that he was wrongfully arrested by immigration agents, claiming his student visa was revoked, even though Mahmoud is a legal permanent resident and not in the U.S. on a student visa.
Trying to clarify this with the university.
Khalil was one of the few protesters who shared his name during the protests last year.
We want a divestment from the Israeli occupation.
In a statement, Columbia University acknowledging reports of ICE around campus. This reported arrest coming on the heels of the Trump administration canceling about $400 million in federal grants to Columbia University. Earlier last week, the president writing agitators will be imprisoned or permanently sent back to the country from which they came.
Our thanks to Camila for that report. NBC News has reached out to the State Department, the Department of Homeland Security, and ICE on Khalil's arrest. The State Department says they cannot comment on individual visa cases. Khalil's attorney says they are unaware of his whereabouts right now.
Police in the Dominican Republic are still searching for a 20-year-old American college student. She was last seen on a beach in Punta Cana 4 days ago. NBC News correspondent Adrian Broaddus has the latest on her disappearance.
A desperate search is underway in the Dominican Republic resort town of Punta Cana. Authorities looking for 20-year-old college student Sudiksha Kanaki, who attends the University of Pittsburgh and vanished Thursday while on spring break. Helicopters in the sky and teams on the beach combing for clues. Missing persons flyers circulating saying she was last seen on the beach at the Rio Republica resort March 6th, the time 4:50 a.m. Sudishka on vacation with friends. In a statement posted online, the local Dominican Republic Emergency Operation says it's coordinating an extensive search, adding, quote, several brigades have been deployed by sea and land to find the whereabouts of the foreigner. Retired FBI supervisor Rob D'Amico says time is critical.
The more time that goes by, it gets worse off because then you're not on a hot lead. But they have to really throw everything at it now.
Can you talk about how the U.S. government gets involved when something happens in another country?
So anytime a threat or something happens, a crime happens to a U.S. citizen, the FBI still has jurisdiction, even if they're overseas.
A University of Pittsburgh spokesperson said they're in contact with authorities in Virginia and her family who lives there, saying, quote, we have offered our full support in their efforts to find her and bring her home safely. As search teams cover the coastline, her family waits for answers. Adrienne Broadus, NBC News.
Coming up, back to Earth. This week, 2 NASA astronauts are finally supposed to head home after that unplanned 9-month stay in space. We're going to have more on the mission to get them back safely.
Plus, 60 years after the violent march known as Bloody Sunday, we'll take you to Selma as civil rights leaders reflect on the future of civil rights. This is Morning News Now.
The countdown is on to finally bring those 2 NASA astronauts back home from the International Space Station.
The SpaceX rocket that's scheduled to bring Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams back to Earth is set to lift off from the Kennedy Space Center this week. NBC's Marissa Parra has the details.
It's been nearly 9 months since astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams last walked on Earth.
Ignition and liftoff of Starliner and Atlas V, carrying 2 American heroes.
The pair blasting off in June for what was supposed to be a week-long mission to the International Space Station.
Butch and I have been up here before, and it feels like coming back home.
And home the ISS became, after their Boeing Starliner spacecraft suffered a series of technical issues, putting their ride back to Earth in serious jeopardy.
NASA said today it may keep those 2 astronauts stuck on the space station up there for another 6 months.
The duo suddenly thrust into the limelight as the world waited to hear their fate. NASA and Boeing ultimately deciding in August the risk to send them home on Starliner was too high. The spacecraft instead returning to Earth unmanned.
Touchdown.
NASA tapping Boeing competitor SpaceX to bring the pair home in 2025.
NASA has decided that Butch and Sunny will return with Crew 9.
Butch and Sunny and the world soon got a lesson on extended stays in space.
I think there's some rumors around outside there that losing weight. I think things shift around quite a bit. You know, you've probably heard of a fluid shift.
The pair staying busy during their endless laps around the Earth, conducting experiments, answering questions from fans and reporters.
And we'll be coming home, riding the plasma, splashing down in the ocean.
Performing multiple spacewalks, Williams setting a new female record.
I'm trying to remember what it is like to walk, because I haven't walked, I haven't sat down.
And of course, taking part in rigorous workouts. Former NASA astronaut Mike Massimino says for astronauts on extended stays, fitness is crucial.
If an astronaut, a person going to space, is going to be up there for that long, 6 months, 8 months, and does not exercise, they're going to have a real problem come back to Earth. They're going to have a lot of bone loss. They're going to have a lot of muscle loss. Your heart would shrink.
Meanwhile, 250 miles down on the pale blue dot known as Earth, the duo's pending return becoming a political flashpoint.
They're left up there for political reasons, which is not good.
Through it all, the veteran pilots staying out of the fray.
We support our nation, we support our nation's leaders, and we're thankful for them. From my standpoint, politics is not playing into this at all.
But the greatest toll of an extended stay was never physical. Heartfelt posts by Wilmore's daughter showing the impact of missed holidays and family moments back on Earth.
I miss him so much, and I cannot wait for him to hug his neck and see my sister graduate high school.
Butch and Sunny, just days away from the end of their own space odyssey, prepare now for the beginning of their next mission, a homecoming 9 months in the making.
Say, hey, we're coming back before long, so, don't make all those plans without me.
Marissa Parra, NBC News.
Financial headlines this morning. A new survey from Bankrate found that Americans tend not to switch up their bank accounts.
CNBC's Savannah Hanau joins us with that and more. Hey, Savannah, good morning.
Hey, Savannah. Hey, Joe. Good morning to you. Yeah, so Americans are keeping these same bank accounts for years. A new Bankrate survey finds that bank and credit union customers have kept the same checking and savings accounts for an average of 19 and 17 years, respectively. Now, more than 40% says that's because it's convenient, it's the account they've always had, and, well, there are plenty of branches and ATMs. Overall, 3/4 of adults have a checking account and 2/3 a savings account, and only about a quarter opened their accounts in the past 5 years. Apple has delayed its big AI upgrade for Siri, and that's also going to impact the company's planned smart display. Bloomberg reports that Apple is postponing the new device because it partially relies on the delayed features for Siri. It's expected to be Apple's first smart home hub with support for Apple Intelligence and run apps such as Calendar, Notes, and Messages. Now, on Friday, Apple said that the Siri upgrade is taking longer than thought and will be released in the coming year. And Krispy Kreme is celebrating the luck of the Irish by rolling out a new collection of donuts for St. Patrick's Day today. Now, it includes the Pot of Gold donut. This is an original glazed, dip in golden caramel icing and topped with caramel buttercream and gold glitter sprinkles. Now, Krispy Kreme is also giving away Pot of Gold Pass, and this is worth free original glazed donuts for a year. Wow. And that means 1 dozen per month from April through next March, guys.
Wow.
Cool.
It's a lot of donuts.
No kidding. At least it's not corned beef donuts. That would be, yeah, right? Ooh. See?
I love corned beef, though.
They know, right, just not a donut. All right.
Not a donut. Thanks, Silvana. Well, it's been 60 years since that 1965 clash between civil rights leaders and police in Selma, Alabama, known as Bloody Sunday.
But as the city marked that historic day, many expressed concerns about the future of civil rights. NBC News correspondent George Solis has the story.
Slowly, hundreds marched and sang over the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Under cold gray skies, they gathered to remember 60 years since Bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama, a monumental day in the civil rights movement. The world watching in 1965 as activists marched that day, brutally beaten and tear gassed by Alabama state troopers. 82-year-old Andrew Rives was there, just 7 years old when he ran from dogs that were set loose on demonstrators.
60 years later, is that memory still vivid of being on this bridge?
Oh, yes, whenever I walk it and look and think about what I came through.
A reminder, too, of the changing political landscape, as some Americans feel the country is slipping on the civil rights that were fought for here. Courtney Walker and her young family here to make sure that doesn't happen.
How important is passing that torch of information?
I think that it's extremely important because I personally feel like we're living in a time where they're trying to erase history.
Bridging that gap between past and present, so important for so many here. Their resounding message, we're not going back.
All right, George Solis, thank you for that report.
Coming up, a touching tradition capturing hearts and likes across America.
Up next, we're going to take you to Kentucky, where some students are going viral for their performance of the Star-Spangled Banner. We're going to tell you why next on Morning News Now. Welcome back. It was a star-studded night on Broadway over the weekend. Some Hollywood A-listers stepped out to see Oh, Mary. Meryl Streep, Martin Short, Brett Goldstein, and Jennifer Lopez were all among the famous faces spotted in the audience for the hit Broadway play on Saturday. The show shared a video of the Hollywood stars with the cast on Instagram. While Streep and Short were simply just enjoying a night out, Lopez and Goldstein, they showed up to support Betty Gilpin, their co-star in Netflix's upcoming movie Office Romance. Oh, Mary is a dark, comedic take on Mary Todd Lincoln's life. Gilpin has been filling in the past couple months for the show's creator and star, Cole Escola. You can catch it at the Lyceum Theater, a show that remains one of Broadway's hottest tickets right now. You might have to fork over some money to catch it.
Have you seen it? I'm assuming.
I've seen it twice, on Broadway and off, and every time I went, there were celebrities there without fail. I saw Isaac Mizrahi, I saw the cast of The Gilded Age, I saw Austin Butler. It's a thing.
Wow, very cool. There you go. Big night. Thanks, Joe. Well, you might recognize this video we're going to show you because it's going viral right now. Hundreds of music students bringing the halls of a Kentucky hotel to life with the sound of music. NBC News Now anchor Hallie Jackson has the story behind this moment.
For 1 week each winter, this is what it sounds like at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Louisville, Kentucky. Hundreds of high school students from the Kentucky All-State Choir uniting each night to sing our national anthem. The spine-tingling sing-along, a longtime tradition in the bluegrass state, going all the way back to 1987. John Strobe helps organize the annual event at a convention for the Kentucky Music Educators Association. Why the national anthem, John?
It's a song they all know. They're familiar with it. They're comfortable with it. They're proud of it.
Chorus teacher Laura Howard brought her students this year. And for Laura, it's a full circle moment. She was one of the kids singing on that same hotel balcony back in 1997. Laura, we talked about your involvement in this tradition. Did this play any part in you becoming a chorus teacher now?
Definitely going to All-State as a high school student and being able to be a part of this helped push me in that direction.
And while this may not be Carnegie Hall, the acoustics in that Hyatt atrium, well, they're enough to give you chills. Striking a chord for thousands online with reactions like, "This moved me to tears. My heart swells with pride," and simply magnificent. What do you think it is about this tradition that brings up the emotions for people?
I think it's just the fact that all the kids come together and no matter what their differences may be, they're all able to come together and sing this song.
It is just incredible to see and, of course, to hear. We're talking about a tradition that has been going on for decades, and they plan to keep it up for years to come. Back to you.
All right, Hallie, thank you so much.
Finally, this hour, meet Mo. He is the newest addition to the police squad in Crystal, Minnesota. This pup isn't sniffing for crime. This is part of a first-time initiative to support the mental and emotional health of the city's officers. Reporter Jessica Hart from our Minneapolis sister station, KARE 11, has more.
The Crystal Police Department has a new best friend.
He's tasked with
a best friend who's constantly in your business.
It takes you out, you're having a bad day, you can come in here, you just see him, and it just changes your day. I mean, he's a special thing.
Sergeant Jake Albers brought Mo to his new home.
We got Mo through Project Delta back in January. We've been working with them for the past year on just finding the right dog that will fit our needs in our department.
Mo's a facility dog who was brought in to help officers manage their stress.
And it's not just, the big calls that causes stress, it's the day-to-day calls. You can smell the cortisol levels. And what he'll do is he'll go up, and if you're sitting down, he'll nudge you.
Friendly bumps that remind you to breathe.
For me, when I do it, it really just helps with stress and anxiety.
He lives at the station 24/7, so Mo is there for every shift and everyone who walks in the door, from officers to people in the community.
I brought him into a person in crisis at our PD, and just bringing Mo into the room completely changed her demeanor. More than any person, I think, could do it. And I think that is the power of a dog, that they have a way of doing that with people that people can't do.
It's also the power of a best friend, a furry, fluffy fella who cares more about you than himself.
Our thanks to Jessica Hart for that report. As it turns out, well, this work, it runs in the family. Mo's brother, Samson, is helping out with wellness over at the Minnetonka Police Department.
And they're both
adorable. Who's a good boy?
Oh, thank you. God, it's been a minute since we heard that.
That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us, so the news continues right now. Good morning. Thanks for kicking off your week with us. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, another twist in the Trump administration's tariff turmoil. The White House now considering even more jabs at Canada, impacting the nation's lumber and dairy products. But how might the tariffs affect your bottom line? And what does Canada's new leader have to say about them? We're going to dig into the details in just a moment. Also this morning, shocking scenes out of one quiet Pennsylvania community over the weekend. A small plane crashing into a residential area in Lancaster County. All 5 passengers on board surviving. More on the tense cockpit moments leading up to impact. Plus, some heartbreaking new details in the death of legendary actor Gene Hackman and his wife. How officials in New Mexico now believe the couple died. And the lingering questions still unanswered this morning. And you're out? Yeah, later in the hour, the brand new tech that's hitting baseball's spring training season. It could change the game and the batter's box forever. It is an incredible talker because it is more accurate, but some people love the human aspect of the whole thing. So it's going to be a big adjustment.
Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. All right, let's begin this morning with the latest on the ongoing trade war with America's biggest trading partners.
Yeah, overnight retaliatory tariffs from China targeting U.S. farm goods came into effect. And days earlier, President Trump discussed plans to expand tariffs on Canada that would target their lumber and dairy products. NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans has more.
Hey there, it's a new week with more tariffs expected and more retaliation against U.S. products and new concerns about how damaging an escalation in this trade war could be for American consumers and businesses. Overnight, President Trump doubling down on his escalating trade war.
I think the tariffs are going to be the greatest thing we've ever done as a country.
While not ruling out an upcoming recession in an interview that aired Sunday morning.
Are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. It takes a little time. It takes a little time.
While his Commerce Secretary also spoke out yesterday morning.
Should Americans brace for a recession?
Absolutely not. There's going to be no recession in America.
Last night, the president asked again if he was worried about a recession.
Maria Bartiromo asked you, and you kind of hesitated.
I'll tell you what, of course you hesitate. Who knows? All I know is this. We're going to take in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs, and we're going to become so rich, you're not going to know where to spend all that money.
And the trade war heating up this week. China retaliating with taxes on some American agricultural goods coming into effect today. And the U.S. will put its tariffs on all foreign steel and aluminum Wednesday and is considering more taxes on Canadian goods. Canada has imposed its own tariffs on billions of dollars of American products. And this weekend, its upcoming new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, former head of the Bank of Canada, speaking out against Trump in his victory speech.
And Donald Trump, as we know, has put, as the Prime Minister just said, unjustified tariffs on what we build, on what we sell, on how we make a living. The Americans, they should make no mistake, in trade as in hockey, Canada will win.
The White House insists this first wave of tariffs is in response to the flow of fentanyl from Mexico, China, and Canada. The president is promising another round in April against even more trading partners. Back to you.
All right, Christine, thank you.
Let's keep this conversation on tariffs going with NBC News international correspondent Janis Mackey Frayer. She is in Beijing. Janis, Christine touched on it briefly just now, but those retaliatory tariffs from China on U.S. farm goods, they're now in effect. Tell us a little more about what is being targeted and how that could impact U.S. agriculture.
Well, it's a big hit for American farmers. China is the largest food importer in the world. Chicken, wheat, cotton, corn, all subject to 15%, 10% on sorghum, soybeans, pork, beef, fruits, vegetables, aquatic and dairy products. This in retaliation for those additional tariffs that President Trump put on all Chinese goods. Now, altogether 20%. The levies take effect today, though any goods shipped before, like even yesterday, or that arrived by April 12th, won't be affected. That Beijing had given a week or so for the tariffs to take effect suggested that officials were wanting some time for negotiation. But there has been so little open communication between the two sides since President Trump first announced the tariffs last month. China's foreign ministry today said, quote, whether it's a tariff war or a trade war, both begin with harming others and end with harming oneself.
So, Janis, you mentioned communication. You know, with Canada and Mexico, those country leaders have at least been in contact with President Trump throughout this trade dispute. That's not the case for China. So can we expect President Trump to engage with President Xi on this issue at some point soon?
Well, China has taken a different approach, more defiance than reaching out, even after President Trump suggested weeks ago that he was going to have a call with Xi Jinping. So far, China has had these 2 rounds of tariffs from the U.S., still far from the 60% that President Trump had talked about on the campaign trail. And for the most part, the China hawks in cabinet haven't been saying much either. One view is that it just isn't Beijing's style to duke it out in real time, and Chinese leaders will not sit in the Oval Office with the cameras rolling. How Xi Jinping looks to his party and to the military matters, and until now, China does not want to appear too conciliatory. You know, all this week through the annual political meetings here in Beijing, Chinese leaders have been seeking to present China as this steady, dependable stalwart, as a contrast to the chaotic decision-making that's coming out of the White House. Chinese officials also say fentanyl is not a good reason for a trade war, so for now they seem willing to bide their time and not ask for a deal.
And Janis, amid these escalating trade tensions, I know you've been looking at Elon Musk's growing popularity in China. Tell us more about this.
Counterintuitive. As anger mounts in the U.S. against Elon Musk and making Tesla a target, this is the one place where his popularity is pretty solid. He's always had an outsized reputation here, given business dealings with Tesla and cozy relations with Chinese leaders. And these days, his brand is getting a boost on Chinese social media. Users are feasting on his claims that Doge teams have unearthed all of this fraud at U.S. federal agencies, and all of his slashing at the U.S. government has become a top trending topic on Weibo with more than 40 million views. Also hot today, Joe, the video of Elon Musk carrying the bag of White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. One user commenting that guests spending time in China has made a difference because he has the social etiquette down. That's a nod to a cultural norm here of men wanting to show good manners by holding a woman's purse. Joe, Savannah.
Right. Janis, thank you so much.
Well, U.S. and Ukrainian officials are preparing to meet in Saudi Arabia this week for peace talks.
Military aid and intelligence sharing, they are on the line. Ukraine is working to repair a tattered relationship with the Trump administration following that contentious meeting between Zelensky and Mr. Trump at the end of last month. And with President Trump focusing on Ukraine, Russia is ramping up its attacks on the war-torn country. NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons joins us now from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia with the latest. Keir, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning to you. We're in for days of intense diplomacy here in Saudi Arabia, as well as those U.S. officials you mentioned. President Zelensky himself is flying in as he tries to repair the damage from that disastrous meeting in the Oval Office, knowing that if these talks fail, then there'll be more pressure from President Trump. This morning, a message from Moscow. Wave after wave of airstrikes on Ukrainian cities, killing 24 in one day this weekend, as the Secretary of State heads to Saudi Arabia for talks with Kyiv. President Trump pressuring Ukraine to agree to a ceasefire.
A lot of people died this week, as you know, in Ukraine. Not only Ukrainians, but Russians. So I think everybody wants to see it get done. We're going to make a lot of progress, I believe, this week.
Trump wants more than a minerals deal, 2 U.S. officials telling NBC News. He wants a change in President Zelensky's attitude to peace. Ukraine desperate to persuade the Trump administration to resume crucial intelligence sharing. The president asked about comments by Poland's leader that Ukraine wouldn't survive without the intelligence sharing, had this response.
It may not survive anyway.
While the vice president faced protesters outside his Ohio home this weekend while out with his 3-year-old daughter, the president's top ally, Elon Musk, writing on X that if he turned off his Starlink service, Ukraine's entire front line would collapse. Zelensky posting his own message. Ukraine has been seeking peace from the very first second of this war. President Zelensky will meet with Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince today, hoping for mediation. But on the front lines, Russia battling to regain part of its Kursk region, its troops using abandoned gas pipelines to attack. NBC News getting close to the Russian front line last week. The Russian military can appreciate being filmed, but believe me, there are a lot of troops there. This weekend, Russia releasing video of drone strikes on Ukrainian tanks in Kursk. As President Trump pushes for peace talks, this is the language of the battlefield. And that conversation, that battle over Kursk, Joe, could take months, and that raises the question about whether Russia really is wanting a ceasefire right now. Meanwhile, the Financial Times citing European officials saying that the Ukrainians are looking for the US to support verification of a ceasefire. The Trump administration discovering, Joe, that getting an end to this war really isn't easy, Joe.
That's right. All right, Keir, thank you so much for your reporting.
Well, the countdown is on for a potential government shutdown. Funding for the nation is set to expire Friday night. Well, in an effort to avoid a shutdown, House Speaker Mike Johnson unveiled a 99-page resolution over the weekend that would keep the government open until September 30th. He is expected to call a vote as early as tomorrow, but maybe not surprisingly, passing the resolution might not be easy. With a current 4-vote majority in the House, the GOP can only afford to lose 1 vote. So if they were to lose 2, as well as all Democrats who are not involved in negotiations on this, vote no, the measure will fail. NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake joins us now with more on this. Hey, Garrett, good to see you. So tell us more about the Speaker's measure here. What are the details, and what can we expect as he works to get it passed?
Yeah, Savannah, another tough week ahead for Speaker Johnson, who's had so many of these, having to navigate such a small majority. This bill essentially extends funding levels, basically Joe Biden's funding levels, through September with some minor changes. Defense spending is up. There's a little bit of additional money for immigration enforcement in this bill. There are some cuts to other domestic discretionary programs and no earmarks for lawmakers in this bill. As you laid out, the margins are so small he can only afford to have 1 Republican no vote if all Democrats vote against this, as they're likely to do. And that Republican no is already spoken for. Thomas Massie, who's voted against a lot of the Speaker's priorities, has said he's a no, which means Mike Johnson has to keep all the other cats in the wheelbarrow, so to speak, to get this over the finish line. He wants to try to vote on it by Tuesday, then basically leave town and make it the Senate's problem to deal with.
So, Garrett, what do we think when it comes to Democrats? From what you've heard, do they seem willing to risk a shutdown?
House Democrats want to vote no on this. They had nothing to do with how it was put together. They don't feel like their priorities are in it. They'll probably vote no just to see if Johnson has the votes to get this to the Senate on their own. But in the Senate, it's a bit of a different story. There you're going to need 7 Democratic votes to pass this. And Johnson can essentially dare them to shut down the government, over it or not. What we've heard from some Senate Democrats who are basically saying, we want to make sure that whatever we sign will actually be followed by the president, that it's not going to be a situation where they pass a spending bill and then Donald Trump and Elon Musk go around cutting whatever they want willy-nilly. So I think there'll be some negotiations probably here at the White House later this week before this gets across the finish line. And I have a hard time imagining Senate Democrats wanting to shut down the government over what's otherwise a pretty standard spending bill.
Garrett, you mentioned what we've seen Elon Musk doing, this slimming down of the government, really this extraordinary effort to do so. And then with this backdrop of a potential government shutdown, how do these two things complicate each other and this debate for all sides?
Well, Republicans would love to take some of what Elon Musk has done and codify it, essentially write it into either a spending bill or another bill that they might pass later this year to really recognize the savings that they're getting in future budgets. But the Democrats just see Elon Musk operating totally outside the bounds of normal government authority, and they want to put some guardrails in place. Now, I can't imagine President Trump signing anything that would limit Elon Musk's power. But if Democrats can get a handshake agreement from the president about some of the changes that are getting made at federal agencies, maybe that's enough to get them to vote yes on all of this and live to fight another day. We will see, Savannah.
All right, we certainly will. You'll be busy, Garrett. Thank you.
It was an alarming scene in Pennsylvania over the weekend. A small plane crashed into the parking lot of a retirement community. Now, all 5 people on board the plane survived. They were injured. Despite the shocking scene, authorities say no one on the ground was hurt. NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin joins us now with the latest on Sunday's crash. Aaron, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. That's right. The crash happened just behind me in the parking lot of that retirement community, very close to people's homes. First responders say this was a split second away from being so much worse. This morning, investigators are looking into this frightening scene.
Receiving multiple calls for an aircraft crash.
After a small private plane crashed into a residential area in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Remarkably, all 5 people on board survived. According to air traffic control, someone on the plane reported an open door on the aircraft shortly after takeoff and requested permission to return to Lancaster Airport.
Lancaster Tower, Bonanza 347 Mike has an open door. We need to return for a landing.
Mike, pull up. Rescue 1, Lancaster Tower. The aircraft is down out just behind the terminal.
Images of the crash show the tail of the plane in a parking lot, while the rest of the aircraft was engulfed in flames. The fire on the ground damaged multiple vehicles. First responders arrived within minutes.
Had that plane stayed in the air for another half a second, it had been into the 2nd or 3rd floor of a multi-story structure that housed a number of apartments.
Brian Pipkin witnessed the crash and called 911 before rushing to help.
The fire was so hot. I was covering my face and the smoke was so thick. And at that point, cars were on fire and they were popping and explosions.
While this latest crash did not involve a commercial aircraft, it comes at a time when aviation safety is under the microscope.
This is a small airplane. The pilot reports a door that's come open. That is a known problem. It is nothing like any of the airliner accidents or even the jet accidents that we've seen.
But travelers across the country are on edge, with a number of major air disasters this year in Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and Toronto. In Lancaster, first responders assured the public they're ready.
We practice, we train, we communicate. Today is just a great example of how, even in a bad situation, so far we've had a pretty good ending.
All 5 passengers remain in the hospital, with 3 being treated in a local burns unit. That, according to fire officials. The NTSB says it is aware of the situation and should release information shortly. Joe.
All right, Aaron, thank you.
Well, state of emergency and a temporary burn ban are in place in New York after a brush fire erupted on Long Island this weekend. 4 fires driven by strong winds broke out on Saturday, but officials say the flames were 100% knocked down by Sunday evening. Well, now investigators are working to figure out what caused the fires. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock joins us now from West Hampton Beach, New York, with more. Hey, Sam, good morning.
Savannah, good morning. Look, it is the volatility of the situation that concerns folks here in Suffolk County. Now, you mentioned the 4 blazes collectively. They say they burned about 600 to 700 acres. But, Savannah, I am standing hundreds of feet away from Sunrise Highway. They say if the flames had jumped that highway, there would be, quote, big problems, because that's where all the pine barrens are. Behind me, one of the businesses impacted. You can just see the trailer over my shoulder as that burn ban is in effect for all of Long Island, New York City, and parts of Hudson Valley, as the threat right now remains.
This morning, residents on Long Island are still shaken from the smoke and flames that dominated the skies over the weekend, before dozens of volunteer fire crews were able to get the upper hand.
My God, my whole place.
Mark Cirillo shared this frightening footage of flames engulfing his longtime business.
I was alone in the building, so I was just trying to get as much equipment, vehicles out of the way of the path of the flames if I could.
Whipping winds up to 35 miles an hour and extremely dry conditions across the region helping to fuel 4 separate blazes, as well as another brush fire in Brooklyn. But that scene only minor compared to the massive plumes of smoke filling the skies on the doorstep of the famed Hamptons. Suffolk County officials say all of the active flames are 100% knocked down, but conditions still pose a threat. At least 80 fire departments joined the frontline battle with help from National Guard helicopters dousing the flames from above. 2 first responders were briefly hospitalized and at least 2 industrial buildings damaged, including Cirillo's business.
And the fire got out of hand. In moments, it was on our property here and it just exploded.
Now an investigation underway into what ignited the flames.
We're going to interview every 911 caller. We're doing an extensive video canvas, so we're going to do everything we would do in a traditional investigation to try to determine whether or not a crime was committed.
Yeah, so as for that investigation, Savannah, the police commissioner here says just because there were 4 different fires doesn't mean there were 4 separate causes to those fires. It's entirely possible the wind could have carried the flames. Their expectation is they'll wrap up the investigation in the next several days as they're looking at things like drone technology, video surveillance, and also, as he mentioned, having conversations with people that called 911 to see what other information they might be able to glean. Savannah, back to you.
All right, Sam, thank you very much.
All right, time now for a look at your forecast for the week ahead with meteorologist Michelle Grossman.
Yeah, it's time for Morning News Now weather. Hey, Michelle, good morning.
Hey there, guys. Great to see you. And we are starting off with some rain in Florida, portions of the southeast. That includes Georgia, North Carolina, also South Carolina. We're going to see moderate to heavy rainfall today. That could lead to some flash flooding. It's beneficial rain, especially for the Carolinas, because we are looking at dry conditions there. But still, it starts out your Monday and starts out your work week pretty soggy. Otherwise, we're looking at record highs in the northern tier of the nation. Temperatures 20, even 30, 40 degrees above what is typical for this time of year. Wait till you see the numbers, because we're looking at 70s and also 80s in some spots. Unfortunately, with those high temperatures, the dry conditions, really gusty winds gusting up to 65 miles per hour, that will prompt some fire dangers there. Also some fire dangers throughout portions of the southwest. I'll show you that in just a minute. Otherwise, sunny and seasonal there. The Pacific Northwest could see a few showers, a little mountain snow there as well. But that really changes on Wednesday, where we have a storm system that will impact the west with a lot of snow, a lot of rain, flooding rains along the coast. And this will make its way across the country. So by Friday, we're talking in the middle of the country with some pretty big impacts. This is going to be a big storm that will bring lots of impacts across the country. But Wednesday, plenty of sunshine in the middle of the country before it's wet on Friday. Spring warm throughout the Carolinas, the mid-Atlantic, parts of the Northeast into the Southeast. Still chilly in New England there. And we're looking at some showers in parts of the South Central states. This is a look at Friday. Heavy snow throughout the Intermountain West. Could see some rain from the northern part of the nation into the Midwest, parts of the Tennessee Valley. Also, the Gulf Coast states could see some severe storms as well. We're going to watch that very closely because the Storm Protection Center is already kind of alerting us to that. So we will watch that as we go throughout the week. Otherwise, we're looking at rain and snow along the coast in portions of the west. So let's talk about those showers. We have an area of low pressure with a frontal boundary that's draped across the state, and that's bringing the chance for that rain. The rain is falling right now. We are even seeing a little bit of lightning, so we could see some embedded storms as well as we go throughout this Monday. This will move quickly out of here on Tuesday, but right now it is pretty soggy in some spots, especially where you see those bright colors. That's where we're seeing that heavy rain falling, and we could see 2 to 3 inches, even 4 inches in some spots, especially in the Carolinas, from Wilmington, North Carolina, down to Charleston. We'll stop it here, guys, but I want to show you this. We do have red flag warnings for 11 million people from the northern plains to the central plains because we are looking at the chance for really gusty winds and very dry conditions. Back to you.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, there's much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now, including the latest from officials in New Mexico on the deaths of actor Gene Hackman and his wife, as a cause of death is finally revealed.
Up first after the break, a positive step in the right direction toward a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. Where those talks stand next.
Welcome back. The latest round of peace talks between Hamas and Israel are expected to get underway in Qatar.
It comes after Israel cut off the electricity supply to Gaza on Sunday, and that's impacting drinking water for part of the enclave.
For the latest, let's bring in NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley. He joins us from Tel Aviv. Hey, Matt, so let's start with that move by Israel to cut off electricity supplies to Gaza. What has Israel said about it? And tell us about the impact that it's having on residents.
Yeah, well, we heard from the Israeli Minister of Energy just yesterday saying that he was going to be doing this. Eli Cohen said that this is part of an effort to try to pressure Hamas. He said in order to make sure that Hamas has no role in Gaza's, quote, day after, which is one of the main topics of discussion internationally. Who is going to be governing Gaza after this war? Now, this is going to be a big problem for the Gazans, but not maybe as big as it sounds, because the fact is, as Hamas noted in their statement reacting to this decision, a lot of the infrastructure that was already bringing electricity into the Gaza Strip has already been destroyed, and Israel has cut off a lot of the electricity ever since October 2023, shortly after that attack that started this latest round of fighting. The big problem, the big impact we're going to see, as you mentioned, is that this electricity from Israel into the Gaza Strip goes toward a desalination plant, and that is vital toward providing water to the Gaza Strip. Israeli authorities did this 1 week after they cut off all aid into the Gaza Strip. And in addition, they've said they haven't ruled out the possibility of possibly cutting off water supplies into the Gaza Strip. That could cause a major humanitarian crisis. Guys.
So, Matt, what does all this mean for ceasefire negotiations? Where do they stand? Are there any signs that both Israel and Hamas are ready for the next phase of talks?
Well, the fact that it sounds as though delegations are being sent to Qatar, as you mentioned in your introduction, is a positive sign that there could be movement. Hamas has said that they have started to sort of soften their position on this. The Israelis have made it clear that the Egyptian proposal that came out over the past couple of days ago, that was something that they rejected because it would involve a leadership role for the Palestinian Authority, which is distinct from Hamas. The Palestinian Authority is based in Ramallah in the West Bank and is the internationally recognized governing group or government for the Palestinian people. But the Israelis are opposed to them as well having any role in the future of the Gaza Strip. The fact is that there is still intractable positions here. The Israelis want to extend the first part of this deal, which has seen swaps between Israeli hostages or foreign hostages in the Gaza Strip for Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, whereas Hamas has said that they want to move on into the next phase of this deal that would see a more permanent truce and possibly the full withdrawal of the Israeli military from the Gaza Strip. These two positions, they don't match.
And Matt, Steve Woodcock, who's President Trump's special envoy to the Middle East, he says the U.S. is focused on making sure a 21-year-old American being held by Hamas still is released. Do we know anything about him or his condition and what the hopes are looking like here?
Yeah, I mean, there isn't much optimism around this, but the fact is that the Americans are now reaching out directly to Hamas, and this is what we heard, and that caused a pretty big sensation here in the Middle East, this revelation that for the first time ever, the Americans were speaking directly to Hamas in violation of their designation as terrorists. But this is being done not by Witkoff, apparently, but by President Trump's hostage negotiator who had been nominated for that position. So it looks as though there could be some movement on this. These negotiations with Hamas are focused on the Americans, Eden Alexander, and another couple of Americans whose bodies, they were killed, whose bodies are still in the Gaza Strip.
All right, Matt Bradley, thank you very much.
In Syria, hundreds of people were killed over the weekend in the deadliest eruption of violence since the fall of the Assad regime.
NBC's Matt Bodner joins us from London with more on that and international headlines. Hey, Matt.
Savannah, Joe, good morning. There's growing concern over this outbreak of violence in Syria. Forces loyal to the new Syrian government have been accused of executing civilians amid an outbreak of fighting in the country's north. The clashes involve holdouts loyal to deposed dictator Bashar al-Assad and forces loyal to the new Syrian government. Syria's new leader, Ahmed al-Sharaa, blamed the violence on Assad loyalists yesterday, but vowed to investigate and bring to justice anyone involved in the killing of civilians. Moving along now to the Vatican, Pope Francis continues his treatment in Rome's Gemelli Hospital, but he did release a prayer on Sunday thanking staff for his care. The latest from the Vatican is that the Pope's condition is mildly improving, though doctors continue to see his status as guarded, meaning that he's not yet in the clear. A statement this morning says that the Pope had another quiet night. Another health update is due later today. And we'll wrap up this hour in Athens, where a local charity is helping this monk seal named Panagis heal up to eventually return to the wild. Panagis was found as a pup 3 months ago, struggling off the coast of Cyprus, orphaned from his mother. He's one of dozens of monk seals that the charity, called Mom, has been taking care of. The species of seal nearly went extinct, but conservation efforts in recent years have seen a dramatic turnaround in their prognosis. Hunting was one of the main threats to their population. Back to you guys.
Seals are really cute.
Yeah, that was a cute one right
Agreed.
there. Good
Really
for what
is.
they're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Coming up, mystery solved.
Yeah, after the break, the very latest in the tragic deaths of Hollywood legend Gene Hackman and his wife, how officials in New Mexico now say the couple died, and the unanswered questions still swirling around the case. That is next.
We are back now with the latest on the investigation into the death of Gene Hackman and his wife. New Mexico officials are now saying the couple died of natural causes, but 1 week apart. The tragic details are bringing some closure to the case, but there are still many unanswered questions. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz has been following every development here and joins us with the latest. Hey, Liz, good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning. Yeah, authorities say Gene Hackman, who had advanced Alzheimer's, died of heart disease, while his wife died of a rare viral infection days earlier. The timing of the death's eerie as new details shed light on how their final days played out, with the big question being, what did Hackman do all alone for 7 days?
This morning, heartbreaking details emerging about the final week of Gene Hackman's life. Authorities revealing the legendary 95-year-old actor died of heart disease, complicated by advanced Alzheimer's, after being alone for several days after his wife and caregiver, Betsy Arakawa, died first of an unrelated rare virus in their Santa Fe home.
I can tell you that he was in an advanced state of Alzheimer's, and it's quite possible that he was not aware that she was deceased.
The medical investigator on the case now saying an autopsy of Hackman's 65-year-old wife shows she died of hantavirus, a disease linked to rodents and found in rural areas of the Southwest, including New Mexico. The virus can cause respiratory failure in some cases.
A person can die very quickly, within 24 to 48 hours, roughly speaking, without medical treatment.
Officials now piecing together Arakawa and Hackman's final days. Investigators believe Arakawa died on or around February 11th, citing her final email communication that morning. Hackman's pacemaker indicates he died 7 days later on February 18th, though their bodies were not discovered for another 8 days on February 26th by a maintenance worker.
Do you believe, given his Alzheimer's status, that Mr. Hackman was able to live on his own and survive for those 7 days?
I'm not aware of what his normal daily functioning capability was. He was in a very poor state of health. He had significant heart disease, and I think ultimately that is what resulted in his death.
What about starvation?
There was no food in his stomach, which means he had not eaten recently, but he had also no evidence of dehydration.
The couple of more than 3 decades were a private pair. Hackman drawn to the quiet Santa Fe life, something he even alluded to in an unplanned TV appearance he made on Guy Fieri's food show in 2008, which happened to be filming at his favorite diner.
Nobody pays any attention, you know.
Just gotta cruise in until we come dragging our cameras.
But as Hackman aged and battled Alzheimer's, he relied increasingly on his wife's care. It appears tragically until her final breath.
So, Liz, are there any questions that investigators are looking at into this, or is it now considered a closed case?
Yeah, well, Savannah, investigators say they have most of the major answers they're looking for, but it is still an open investigation, and it's likely they'll never know exactly what happened in those 7 days. Their dog, Xena, that died in a crate, is currently undergoing a necropsy, which will determine her cause of death, although sadly authorities say it's possible she did starve. Authorities are also still trying to access all the cell phone data to determine if there was any further communication to anyone after February 11th. As of now, it does not appear that there was, Savannah.
All right, Liz, thank you very much.
Facebook owner Meta is facing a wave of new allegations this week from a memoir written by a former senior staffer. The book, titled Careless People, is being billed as a first-hand account of Sarah Wynne Williams' years at the company. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Goss joins us now with more on this. Steph, good morning.
Joe, good morning. Sarah Wynne Williams started at Facebook in 2011. Mark Zuckerberg was just 27 years old. Facebook was exploding into a social media giant, changing the course of history. That is why she says she wanted to be a part of it. But in a new book set to be released tomorrow, she says Facebook was not what it appeared in public, and neither was the top brass, Zuckerberg and former executive Sheryl Sandberg. Now, with Meta only growing more powerful, she tells me she felt compelled to sound an alarm. Mark Zuckerberg stood in a line of billionaire tech giants at President Trump's inauguration, a far cry from the dorm room where Facebook was conceived. Meta now on the cusp of growing even more influential in the era of artificial intelligence.
I think people deserve to know what this big, powerful company is really like.
In her book, Careless People, a cautionary tale of power, greed, and lost idealism, former Facebook employee Sarah Wynne Williams relies on documents, emails, and her own experience to chronicle the 6 years she worked at the company. The former diplomat helping Facebook navigate global relations with world leaders. When did the ideal for you start to crack?
It was one of those things that was sort of drip, drip. It was hearing reports that there were teens who were committing suicide after being bullied on the platform, people telling us that Facebook was triggering riots.
Meta says the book is filled with false accusations, and it is taking legal action to try and stop its publication. You describe something called lethal carelessness in the book. What does that mean?
To me, that's about knowing that you're causing harm and damage, and in some instances, leading to death, and not doing anything about it.
And did you see that?
I saw that.
In 2014, Zuckerberg told Savannah he was focused on growing the platform.
I've spent a lot of late nights pacing around my living room, with teammates, right, just trying to plot out what our next move can be in order to keep pushing forward on this mission.
That same year, Wynne Williams says she grew especially concerned with Facebook's strategy to break into the Chinese market and what it was prepared to do for the government.
They wanted a version of Facebook that could censor, sort of the anti-freedom of expression version of Facebook.
And to do that, did Facebook have to compromise some of its policy?
To me, it seemed like Facebook compromised almost every policy it had.
In the end, a deal was never finalized. In a statement, Meta says, "We do not operate our services in China today. We ultimately opted not to go through with the ideas we'd explored," which Mark Zuckerberg announced in 2019. Wynne Williams spent much of her time at Facebook working closely with the company's high-profile, charismatic chief operating officer, Sheryl Sandberg. Sandberg wrote the book Lean In, a playbook for women in the workplace, and a call for companies to do a better job supporting them.
Helping women to raise their hands, nothing can be stronger.
But inside Facebook, Wynne Williams says that was not her experience.
The expectation was work begets more work and you should do more work.
Wynne Williams says she became nervous about flying late in her second pregnancy, but that she felt pressured by Sandberg to travel for an international work trip anyway.
The response was, "Oh, you're past the date that you're supposed to fly. Can you get a note from your doctor saying that it's okay for you to fly?"
In 2017, Wynne Williams accused a different executive of sexual harassment, and she believes that is why she was fired. A Meta spokesperson said this is a mix of out-of-date and previously reported claims about the company and false accusations about our executives. 8 years ago, Sarah Wynne Williams was fired for poor performance and toxic behavior, and an investigation at the time determined she made misleading and unfounded allegations of harassment. The mother of three says she wrote this book knowing the reaction could be fierce, but she says she felt compelled. Do you think Mark Zuckerberg should be running a company this powerful?
I think this company is only going to get more powerful, and we need to figure out what that means.
For someone who is not elected, who isn't going anywhere.
Who shapes the day-to-day lives of billions of people.
The company points out that Mark Zuckerberg has testified in front of Congress about the protections the platform has put in place for children. And in terms of their own employees, they say they lead the industry in providing benefits to employees who are expecting or already have children, Joe.
All right. Stephanie, thank you so much for that interview.
Well, coming up, some pretty tough news this morning, actually about butterflies here in America.
Yeah, after the break, the scientists now racing to figure out why exactly populations are dropping across the country and what they're doing to try and stop it. Stay with us. That's next. Welcome back. A new study reveals that butterfly populations are declining, and it's happening at what researchers are calling a catastrophic rate. NBC News correspondent Maya Eaglin spoke with scientists to find out why this is happening and what can be done to stop it.
An alarming new study is causing a flutter in the scientific world. America's butterflies are on the decline. The journal Science finding that since 2000, the insect's population has dropped 22%.
It is catastrophic. I'm distressed. It really keeps me up at night.
Co-author of that study, Nick Haddad, says climate change, habitat loss, and insecticides are just some of the factors contributing to the dip. He also noted that while the species has been on a decline, the scope of this loss is staggering.
The trend is so consistent, and it's true over time, and it's true over so many places that was surprising.
You can look at these and kind of learn the...
At the American Museum of Natural History in New York, curator and invertebrate zoology chair Jessica Ware has been watching this downfall in real time.
We know that insect biodiversity has been decreasing, certainly since the Industrial Revolution, but it has really accelerated in the last several decades.
How big of a problem do you think these declining populations in butterflies are?
I think we should be really, really concerned. They're important food sources for lots of different animals, including other insects like dragonflies, but also mammals and birds. It affects the plants that they're pollinating. So when we see declines like that, which are being reported, it should be a red flag, like a real loud warning bell saying something has to change.
All of this leaving the future of the over 700 species of U.S. butterflies in the wild up in the air, making exhibits like this one more important than ever.
I do see some, but never as many as I used to see when I was a little girl.
It's sad to think that if in my lifetime butterflies could be extinct.
But there is some good news on the horizon. The monarch butterfly population that migrates from the U.S. and Canada to Mexico in the winter is rebounding. Mexico's Commission for National Protected Areas revealing that the area the monarchs covered in their country doubled this year compared to last, a potential silver lining for the threatened migratory species. So what actions can be taken to help them bounce back? Experts say using less insecticides on our crops is an important step, but also note that on an individual level, planting butterfly-friendly plants like milkweed in your backyard has a huge impact.
There is hope for butterflies to reverse course and recover again. We just have to be able to make changes that get us off the current track that is downward.
As everyone from scientists to home gardeners work to ensure these airborne beauties stay safe in our skies. Maya Eaglin, NBC News.
Now let's get you some financial headlines this morning. CVS plans to open some new stores, but with a little bit of a different floor plan.
CNBC's Savannah now has that and some other money news. Savannah, good morning.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Savannah. Good morning to you. Yeah, definitely a little bit different. So, yeah, CVS plans to open a dozen stores. So it's going to be offering full-service pharmacies, but very limited retail space. The Wall Street Journal reports that these new stores will be on average less than 5,000 square feet. That's not even half the size of a typical CVS, and they will stock health-related products such as pain and cough medications and first aid, but you won't see other items like makeup or greeting cards that have been staples at drugstores for years. Bitcoin is falling today as cryptocurrencies come under pressure from uncertainty over the financial markets, the U.S. economy, and regulation of the industry. The crypto summit at the White House on Friday failing to provide any details on President Trump's plans on rules for the sector. And markets are also grappling with concerns over tariffs, deflation in China, and the prospect of a recession in the U.S. this year. And the wait is almost over. Death Stranding 2 on the Beach is coming to PlayStation 5 at the end of June. The company behind the popular game, that's Kojima Productions, dropping a 10-minute trailer at South by Southwest this weekend. Pre-orders start on March 17th. Now, the original version of Death Stranding has sold more than 19 million copies worldwide since its release in 2019. I'm sure lots of gamers are very happy.
Yeah, really. Thanks, Savannah.
You got it.
Well, this morning we are taking a look at the history behind one of the biggest media companies in the U.S. You might have heard of it, the Walt Disney Company.
In a new book called After Disney, one of our very own producers here at NBC News tells the story of Disney before it became a global brand known for its theme parks, animation, and film franchises. Disney's path to success largely took off after Walt Disney, the company's founder, died in 1966. And we are so excited to have Neil O'Brien, the author of After Disney, with us here. We work with him behind the scenes every single day, and we are so excited for you because you have been working on this a very long time.
You say 17 years.
17 years. That is something. Give us a little bit about the focus of the book and why it was so important for you to work on this.
So the book charts this 20-year period of time right after the death of Walt, and he was this visionary leader, started a lot of Disneyland and animated films, but he died suddenly in 1966, and there was no clear succession plan in place. So the company's thrown into a bit of turmoil, and so I wanted to chart this time period through the lens of his beloved son-in-law and future CEO, Ron Miller, and tell the story from his perspective for the first time, because while that's happening, at the same time, there's this generational shift also happening at the core of the business, which is animation. And so these two upstairs, downstairs levels of change are happening. And I knew it'd be rich, and I wanted to tell like a novel and chart like this in a very dynamic way for readers who either are fans of Disney or even people who aren't but just want to read a good book.
It totally reads like a novel, Neil. It's fantastic. And there was so much that I was surprised by as a big Disney fan. First of all, the fact that it was like the animation kind of heart of it almost didn't even exist. It almost kind of hit this wall. The way that you chart maybe sort of a little known film now called The Black Cauldron, which like was such a big piece of what was going on behind the scenes. Did anything really surprise you?
Yeah, I mean, all those things, but also, you know, Ron Miller's story surprised me a bit because he's sort of the forgotten CEO of Disney. You probably know Bob Iger.
Right.
You probably know Michael Eisner, but you probably haven't heard that much about Ron Miller, and yet under his leadership, you have things like global theme parks, you have computer animation, home video, a subscription channel, not unlike Disney Plus, but at the time, the Disney Channel, for the Disney catalog. And so you have all these major things happening under his leadership that set up the company for future success. But then in 1984, his cousin-in-law, Roy E. Disney, decides the company has stagnated creatively. And so he decides that Ron Miller should leave the company, and he leads an effort to do that. And so learning how Ron reacts to that forced resignation was totally new to me. And I learned that late in this 17-year journey.
Wow. Sounds like a good subject for a book there. When we talk about American culture, I mean, Disney creates culture, it curates culture, it reflects culture. I mean, talk about how, for Disney, culture has evolved with time.
Sure. So early in the book, I tell this story that in 1962, Walt and Ron and the rest of the Disney family, they're gathered to watch To Kill a Mockingbird, which is a Universal film. And the lights come on, and Ron Miller says, you know, that's about as perfect a film as you can make. And Walt, on the other hand, looks visibly frustrated. And Ron doesn't quite understand why at first. And then Walt says, I wish I could make that picture, but I can't because the public would not accept that from me. Now, keep in mind, this is at the height of the civil rights period, and To Kill Mockingbird could be seen as a controversial film, right? And so that stays with Ron, that moment. And so as culture changes in the 70s and 80s, the Disney brand at times feels very confining. So Ron has to lead this effort to expand the brand. Eventually he starts Touchstone Pictures, which has a big success right away with Splash, which launched the career of Tom Hanks. And again, like that brand evolution is why now we have a company that can house an ESPN, a Marvel, a Star Wars, a Nat Geo all under the same house. It's because he helped expand the brand. And I think, you know, as times change, it's important to make sure your brand evolves with the time.
Neil O'Brien, thanks for joining us. It's a fascinating story, an amazing read. You can get it right now. And Neil, you're great on this side of the camera. It's great to have you.
This is where it all starts,
He's in
right
our
here,
ears
Neil.
sometimes in the control room. It's great to have you here with us.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Neil.
All right, coming up, you're out.
After the break, we're digging into some buzzworthy new tech that's shaking up baseball's spring training this season and could potentially change the game in the batter's box forever. It's up next. Stay with us. We're back, and we're going to end this hour with an age-old debate that's found in nearly every sport these days. How many rule changes are too many?
Well, in spring training this year, Major League Baseball is putting that question to the test with new technology that could forever change the game. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch got an inside look.
Love it.
He got him looking some.
Or hate it.
Called strike three, and Schwarber is.
When a baseball umpire calls strike three, no amount of shouting will change the outcome. But that might be about to change.
And we're going to have a challenge here from the catcher.
Right now, Major League Baseball is using spring training to test an automated ball strike system, or ABS, which lets players challenge an umpire's pitch call. Here's how it works. Only the pitcher, catcher, or batter can challenge by tapping their head right after the umpire's call. Then within seconds, using a series of cameras around the field, the program shows the fans at the ballpark or watching on TV where the pitch crossed the plate in relation to the strike zone. The experimental system is being used in about 60% of this year's spring training games.
It's been a good little process so far.
We caught up with the Bronx Bombers at their spring training home in Tampa, Florida, to get their perspective on the new system.
I think it's good for baseball. I don't know if I'm really that much in favor of it. I like that human element part of it.
Fans are also divided.
It's how it's been for the last 100+ years. That's how it should stay.
Can definitely see the advantage of it.
Some call ABS a robo-umpire. And if MLB ever completely eliminated that human element, we'd lose the sarcasm and the drama of those nose-to-nose shouting matches. Yankees manager Aaron Boone is no stranger to being tossed from a game.
If you completely got rid of the umpires, who would you yell at?
I'd yell at somebody.
We did not meet anyone who totally wants the umpires out of here.
Hell no. No shot. Getting rid of umpires is crazy.
As long as they keep the umpires there, I got no problem.
The league tested ABS extensively in the minor leagues last year and says in AAA, just over half of challenged calls were overturned. But the question remains, is this system ready for prime time?
Our thanks to Jesse Kirsch for that report. Major League Baseball now says it's going to ask for player feedback and hints that we could possibly see this ABS system used in the regular season as early as next year. It's a huge adjustment for the batters because suddenly the strike zone's totally different. It might be accurate, but it's not what they're used to. But I'm one of those people who loves just the human aspect of the game. Maybe the umpire gets it wrong, but that's just part of the game.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Joe. Same.
I was an umpire many years ago. So. All right, that is going to do it for this hour of Morning News.
One of Joe's many lives. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.